Hi, Dr. Avinash here. In this series of video, I will be helping you out with cardiovascular pharmacology. Now, if you open up your textbooks, you will realize that there are actually 6 important chapters from cardiovascular format, but you're not going to follow the same order. You're going to follow the order of chapters that I am going to suggest to you. The idea behind this reorganization is to make things simple for you. Okay, so if you do chapter number 36, 37, 38, 39, 40 and 41, things will become confusing. Instead, you start with chapter number 38. That should be your chapter number 1 as far as cardiovascular drugs go, followed by antihypertensive, anti-anginal, followed by drugs affecting renin-angiotensin system, then nitric oxide and vasoactive peptides, and finally you will do antiarrhythmic. Easy, simple. So let's start with chapter number 1 of cardiovascular drugs, that is cardiac glycosides. Now, before I start with this particular chapter, I want you to be clear with certain words. These words are chronotropy, ionotropy, dromotropy, bathmotropy, and luciotropy. Chronotropy means the heart rate. So when I say positive chronotropic effect, in your mind you should be like, oh, it increases the heart rate, positive effect on heart rate. If I say negative chronotropic, you should be thinking decrease in heart rate. Simple. If I say positive ionotropy, it would be force of contraction. How forcefully is the muscle contracted? Okay. When I say positive ionotropy, it will be a medicine that increases the force of contraction. Okay. And when I say negative ionotropy, it would be a medicine that decreases the force of contractions of the heart. Dromotrophy would be speed of impulse conduction. Okay, there has been a mistake here. It is an impulse conduction in the heart. Dromotrophy means speed of impulse conduction. Bathmotrophy means excitability of the heart, and luciotropy means the relaxation of the heart. Now you might be wondering, are these not related? No, they are not related. You can have high heart rate with poor muscle contractions. Simple. You can have positive dromotropy, increase in speed of impulse conduction, but heart rate might be low. The speed of impulse might be great, but the heart rate might be low. So I hope you have understood that these words, all of them pertain to heart. They are referring to the heart, but they are not really interconnected. It's not necessary that a positive chronotropic drug will be positively ionotropic also. Getting the idea? If this is clear, let us start with chapter number 38. Cardiac glycosides and drugs for heart failure. Now, what are cardiac glycosides? They are glycosides. Glycosides are chemicals, special type of chemicals. Uh, they act on the heart and have positive ionotropic property. Ionotropic property is the force of contraction. So more forceful contraction. So when heart contracts more forcefully, the output will increase, right? Simple, easy. Now, please understand that we are only increasing the force of contraction, not the number of times the heart is going to beat. Nothing like that. Only force is increasing. So, for increasing the force of contraction, you don't really require too much of oxygen. If there was a medicine that increased heart rate, then yes, oxygen demand increases, oxygen consumption by the heart increases. A positively ionotropic drug need not increase the oxygen consumption of the heart. Okay. You know where we will use these drugs? In congestive heart failure. Okay. Well, many more drugs have come in the market, but originally the only medicine that worked for heart failure was cardiac glycosides. Now you need to skip all these things that I am not really discussing with you, okay? And directly jump on to the important parts like chemistry, okay? Um, Chemistry, what you need to know for your MCQ sake is Every cardiac glycoside has a steroid ring and an unsaturated lactone component and sugars. MCQ. That's it. Move on. Let's talk about the pharmacological action. Now, to understand pharmacological action, let me help you out with this picture. Once you understand this picture, the mechanism of action will become easier. Also, pharmacological effects will also become clear. This is what normally happens. Okay, normal. This is what is going to happen. Step number one is there is going to be cardiac impulse. In your heart, there is SA node, AV node, bundle of its, bundle branches, and Purkinje fibers. The SA node, AV node, bundle of its, they are called as the impulse generating and impulse conducting system of the human. So imagine an impulse has reached the heart muscle. This diagram is that of a heart muscle. The moment impulse arrives at the heart muscle, first, the calcium channels open. What channels open? Calcium channel. Calcium comes inside the cell. Reason? Calcium is more outside the cell, less inside the cell. So when calcium channels will open, calcium will come inside the cell. Things always move from higher concentration to lower concentration. Easy. The calcium that has come inside the cytoplasm of this muscle cell stimulates the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. SR is endoplasmic reticulum. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. It's called as SR because in muscles the endoplasmic reticulum is called as sarcoplasmic reticulum. Here. So step number one, calcium came in through special calcium channels called as L-type calcium channels. Step number two, this calcium which came in from outside the cell stimulated the sarcoplasmic reticulum. To be very precise, it stimulated the RYR2. RYR2 is ryanodine receptor 2. This is the calcium channel. One of the important functions of sarcoplasmic reticulum is to store calcium. Okay. So, the moment calcium comes from, see, impulse came, that led to opening of L-type calcium channel. Calcium came inside the cytoplasm of the cardiac muscle. This calcium stimulated the RYR2, ryanodine receptor calcium channel number 2 or ryanodine receptor number 2. The ryanodine receptor opened and calcium started coming out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Getting the idea? And as a result, the level of calcium in the cytoplasm is increasing. Fine. Calcium came from two places. One from outside the cell through the L-type calcium channel, and two, it came from the ryanodine receptor number 2. Easy? The calcium levels of the cytoplasm increased. This increase in cytoplasmic calcium causes cardiac contraction. This calcium interacts with the troponin C and other muscle proteins, because of which the heart muscle contracts. Easy. Now when the heart wants to relax, this calcium has to go back from where it came from. If calcium will be there inside the cardiac muscle, the heart will remain contracted. You want the calcium to get out, get back to where it came from. So what will happen? SERCA2, SERCA, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, some people call it sarcoplasmic endoplasmic reticulum, CA, calcium ATPase 2, spending ATP, the muscles of the heart will take all the calcium that had come out from the sarcoplasmic reticulum and put it back in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Simple. But calcium came from two sources, na? One from outside, step number one. Second was from sarcoplasmic reticulum. Whatever came from sarcoplasmic reticulum was put back into sarcoplasmic reticulum. Easy? Fine. What about the calcium that came from outside? That has to be thrown outside. Getting it? And to throw that outside, we have two methods, two main methods. The first method is called as calcium ATPase method. Calcium ATPase spends ATP and takes that calcium and throws it outside. But throwing of calcium by calcium ATPase is not enough. We require more calcium to get out. And to allow that to happen, there's another pump called as NCX. NCX stands for sodium calcium exchanger. Sodium calcium exchanger. Simple. The sodium calcium exchanger is a very simple concept. There is 3 sodium outside the cell. Sodium is more outside the cell always. Sodium is less inside the cell. So sodium will try to come in. Things move from higher concentration to lower concentration. This sodium wants to come in. Let it come in. Let it come in. But when it is coming in, you say, if sodium is coming in, let calcium get out. Exchange offer. Now you might be wondering, why is sodium more outside the cell and why is it less inside the cell? Well, all our cells have a special transport protein called as sodium potassium ATPase pump. The job of this pump is to take sodium from inside and throw it out. That's the reason why cells have low concentration of sodium inside and more concentration of sodium outside. Clear? So let me give you all the steps one more time. Step number 1, action potential, impulse arrived at the cardiac muscle. Step number 2, L-type calcium channel open. Step number 3, voltage gated channels have opened. So calcium will now come in. So step number 3 is influx of calcium. Step number 4, the calcium triggers RYR2. Step number 4, calcium triggers RYR2. 1, arrival of action potential. 2, opening of calcium channel. 3, influx of calcium. 4, opening of RYR2 channels. You know what will happen? Step number 5, massive increase in cytosolic calcium. Step number 6, calcium interacts with muscle proteins and cause contraction. Next step, calcium from the cytoplasm is pumped, spending energy, pumped back into sarcoplasmic reticulum by SERCA2, sarcoplasmic endoplasmic reticulum calcium ATPase 2. Still some cytosolic calcium is remaining. This cytosolic calcium of course came from outside, you need to throw back out. So there are 2 ways of doing it. First, using calcium ATPase pump, and second is sodium calcium exchanger. Remember, sodium calcium exchanger works only if sodium is more outside the cell and less inside the cell. Whose job is to put more sodium outside the cell? Sodium potassium ATPase pump. Clear? If yes, give it a thumbs up. Now, when we give a person digoxin, the digoxin goes and binds to that sodium potassium ATPase pump and inhibits it. Not all sodium potassium ATPase, but it does inhibit sodium potassium ATPase pump. When sodium potassium ATPase pump is inhibited, do you think that enough sodium will be pushed outside the cell? The pump which was throwing sodium out is not going to work now. So what will happen? The concentration of sodium outside the cell will be slightly lower than normal. Getting the idea, right? Simple. So what is digoxin doing? How is it helping the heart? Not directly. It has blocked sodium potassium ATPase pump, because of which enough sodium was not thrown out of the cardiac muscle cell. Simple. Now let's start the contraction process again. Action potential or impulse arrived at a muscle cell, cardiac muscle cell. L-type calcium channel is open. There was influx of calcium. This calcium triggered RYR2 receptor. RYR2 opened, calcium came out of sarcoplasmic reticulum. There was a massive increase in cytosolic calcium. This calcium interacted with troponin C, muscle proteins, contraction took place. For relaxation to happen, SERCA picked up all the calcium that was equivalent to what came from sarcoplasmic reticulum. Whatever sarcoplasmic reticulum gave to the cytosol, it will take it back via SERCA2. Simple. Now whatever calcium had come from outside has to be thrown outside. There were two methods. Method number one, calcium ATPase. It is working normally. It will throw calcium how much ever it throws out. But there is still calcium remaining. Who is supposed to throw that calcium out? Sodium calcium exchanger. But can the sodium calcium exchanger work properly? No. You know why? Because enough sodium is not there outside the cell, na? Because digoxin has blocked the sodium potassium ATPase bond. Getting the idea? Simple, easy to understand. So what will happen to that calcium which was not thrown out? Will it remain in cytoplasm? No. The calcium that was in the cytoplasm will be additionally pushed back into sarcoplasmic reticulum. So now sarcoplasmic reticulum has extra calcium. Let me try and give some numbers to help you out. Huh? This is just a concept. Imagine 10 calcium came from outside. And that 10 calcium led to release of 100 calcium molecules from sarcoplasmic reticulum. Simple. Contraction took place. When relaxation normally happens, SERCA should put 100 calcium ions back into SR. Calcium ATPase should throw out, let's say, 5. And sodium calcium exchanger should throw out 5. Matter ends. But after giving digoxin, this is what is going to happen. 10 came from outside, 100 came from SR. Relaxation started, 100 went back into SR. Calcium ATPase threw out 5. Sodium calcium exchanger only threw out 3. 2 remain behind. That 2 calcium ion go back into sarcoplasmic reticulum. So now how much is the calcium inside sarcoplasmic reticulum? 102. Getting the idea? Next time an impulse comes, 10 calcium will come from outside, 102 will come from inside sarcoplasmic reticulum. Getting the idea, right? So now instead of 110 ions of calcium, we have 112 ions of calcium. Same process will continue. 2 will remain back because sodium calcium exchanger will not work. So 2 will go back into SR. Now SR has 104. You get the idea, right? Slowly and gradually, the SR will get loaded and loaded and loaded with calcium. And remember what I said at the start of this diagram explanation? The more the calcium, the better the forceful contraction of the heart. So digoxin, by blocking sodium potassium ATPase pump, is slowly and gradually overloading the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Please understand, every time the heart will beat, it will relax, little calcium will get added, little calcium will get added, little calcium will get added. That's the reason why the digoxin action will take some time to develop. Because instantaneous increase in sarcoplasmic reticulum calcium will not happen. Slow, gradual increase is going to happen. I hope I am making myself amply clear. Now, if this is clear, look at the mechanism of action. Increases force of contraction by a direct action on the cardiac muscle without the help of nerves. It binds to the extracellular phase of membrane-associated sodium potassium ATPase of myocardial fibers and inhibits this enzyme. This causes progressive accumulation of sodium inside the cell. Right now sodium inside the cell is equal to calcium not going out. So diminished calcium exclusion takes place. Easy, simple. So what I have already explained is again explained here. During depolarization, calcium will come from outside to inside because there is a huge gradient. Outside the cell there is more than 1 millimoles, and inside the cell there is only less than 100 nanomoles of calcium. Huge gradient is there. Too much calcium outside, too little calcium inside. So it will come in through voltage sensitive N-type calcium channel, which triggers the release of stored calcium. Where was it stored? From sarcoplasmic reticulum through calcium activated channel called as ryanodine receptor channel number 2. Cytosolic calcium increases to 500 nanomoles. Remember, it was normally less than 100. 5 times increase happened. This triggers contraction by activating troponin C on myofibrils. Then SERCA2 is activated, which pumps calcium back into SR, where it is stored. This calcium is stored bound to a protein called as calsequestrin. Okay. Normally, SERCA does not work. You don't need to write that in your exam. It's okay. But in normal state, SERCA2 remains inhibited by a cytoplasmic protein called as phospholamban. This phosphorylation of PLN by phosphokinase A removes inhibition and SERCA becomes active. You can skip those points for your exam as far as possible. Okay. A fraction of calcium, whatever came from outside, has to be thrown out. And how does it get out? By 3 sodium 1 calcium exchanger, or the NCX pump, and by calcium ATPase. Simple. To allow this 3Na plus 1 calcium exchange transporter to work, it is necessary that the membrane sodium potassium ATPase moves 3 intracellular sodium ions outside for 2 potassium ions. But because of digoxin, there is a slight increase in cytosolic sodium over normal. Getting it? Because digoxin has inhibited the sodium potassium ATPase pump, which indirectly reduces the transmembrane gradient of sodium, which means sodium does not want to come in, and as a result calcium will not be thrown out. Whatever excess calcium is remaining in the cytosol is taken up by SR. Slowly and gradually the SR gets loaded with more calcium, so whatever next contraction is there, it becomes augmented. Clear? Now the reason why digoxin will not work instantaneously is because binding is very slow, and even after the inhibition of sodium potassium ATPase pump, loading of calcium is going to take gradually. So the action will take hours to develop. Even if you give IV, it doesn't matter. Now the problem is the inhibition of sodium potassium ATPase pump. The action is good, but if you do it too much, there will be toxic actions also. How? See, what was the job of sodium potassium ATPase pump? Take sodium from inside, throw it out. Take potassium from outside, pull it in. When you block the pump, will potassium come in? No, na? So there will be depletion of intracellular potassium. That's the reason why in digoxin toxicity there will be a role of infusing potassium. How? When you give potassium, potassium removes digoxin's toxicity by decreasing the binding of this glycoside to sodium potassium ATPase. Clear? See, if you give too much calcium, there will be unnatural contractions. So excessive calcium can result in spontaneous cycles of calcium release and uptake. So there can be oscillatory, delayed after depolarization contractions which are not supposed to happen, and after contractions can happen. Okay, now please understand, the action is loading of calcium, better contraction. The side effect is extra calcium causing arrhythmias. So basically it's the same action, two manifestation. It's our job as doctors to give just the correct amount, just the correct dose for just the correct time period, so that you won't look at action and side effects are minuscule, because the actions and the side effects are non-subjective. Okay. Now this was the main action. If you write this much in your exams, you are through. But apart from this, because we want to score some bonus points also and we need to know everything in detail, digoxin also has a weak action as a vasoconstrictor. So peripheral resistance increases, and as a result slight blood pressure increases. Okay. In patients with congestive heart failure, this might seem like a big problem. First of all, his heart is not working. His heart is failing to pump blood, and now we are giving a medicine that increases the blood pressure. The good thing is this drug also increases the force of contraction. So the improvement in circulation more than more than what is required compensates this potential side effect. So logically speaking, there is no direct effect on BP. Systolic BP may increase, diastolic may fall in congestive heart failure patients. So even in hypertension and all, we don't really stop using digoxin. We can give it directly. There is no contraindication of hypertension as such. Nothing happens to coronary circulation, so you can easily give it for heart patients. In kidney, actually, by improving the circulation, digoxin causes diuresis. Circulation becomes better, renal perfusion, more blood reaches the kidney now, no? So all that extra fluid that accumulates in the body in patients of congestive heart failure is being removed. Slowly and gradually, whatever salt and water was retained is thrown out. But in people like us, normal human beings, who are not suffering from congestive heart failure, this may not really happen. So diuresis is not compulsory. It only happens in congestive heart failure. Even if a person has edema because of some other cause, diuresis is not going to happen. And digoxin has very little effect on brain. Only the higher doses acts on the chemoreceptor trigger zone, which causes nausea and vomiting. If you give too high doses, then it can cause hyperapnea, sympathetic stimulation, confusion, disoriented, and visual disturbance. Okay. Rest all is not really important. As of now, skip pharmacokinetics, not really important at this point of time. Maybe we'll come to it later on. Let's talk about the adverse effects, toxic effects. See, the good thing is side effects are easy to detect. The bad thing is toxicity is very high. And if this drug has a low therapeutic index, which means the safety margin is low. 25% of people will develop one or other toxic symptoms, which is a pretty high percentage. So what are the toxic symptoms that you might see? There are two kinds of toxic symptoms that are seen: cardiac toxic symptoms and extra cardiac toxic manifestations. Extra cardiac would include anorexia, nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain. These are usually the first to come. This is usually because of gastric irritation and blood vessels of the intestine undergoing constriction, mesenteric vasoconstriction, and that chemoreceptor trigger zone thing causing nausea and vomiting. Some people can also have diarrhea. Some people. Other CNS effects include fatigue, malaise. Fatigue is, in Hindi we call it thakavat. Malaise is a general feeling of ठीक नहीं लग रहा is what we call in Hindi. Headache, mental confusion, restlessness, hyperapnea, disorientation, psychosis can happen, and even visual disturbances can happen. And for prolonged exposure to this drug, skin rashes and gynecomastia can also potentially happen. The cardiac side effects are arrhythmias. Every type of arrhythmia is possible, but common one is pulses bigeminus. But all nodal tachycardias, extrasystole, ventricular extrasystoles, tachycardias, fibrillation, everything can happen. Partial to complete atrioventricular block, so impulses from the atria will not reach the ventricle. That can happen. It can happen alone, or it can happen with other kinds of arrhythmias. Bradycardias are known. Extrasystoles, atrial extrasystole, flutters and fibrillation of the atrium is noted. See, the good news is extra cardiac side effects happen first in most of the people. Most of the people. Which means there is an opportunity to save that human being, stop the drug. So first and foremost, stop digoxin. Most of the time you don't have to do anything. Automatically the patient will get cured. Only for extra cardiac you can be so cheap. For cardiac manifestations you have to admit the patient and observe him for tachyarrhythmias. When tachyarrhythmia happen, ask the patient, are you only taking digoxin or are you taking diuretics as well? Because when you are giving diuretics, if you remember the side effects of diuretics, they also cause potassium depletion, and digoxin also causes potassium depletion. So you have to infuse KCl, potassium chloride. You can give it injection, or in milder cases you can even give it oral. Remember, higher potassium will decrease the binding. Simple. So it's kind of an antagonist. But you know what happens? You explain to the patient, see, this medicine is going to act slowly. It will take hours or days, sometimes it will take weeks for the optimum result to come. So slow down, take one tablet in the morning, you know, something like that, or uh, one tablet in the evening. You have given the schedule. Many patients use this weird calculation that if I take one tablet for 7 days and I get the effect on seventh day, if I take all the seven tablets on day number one, I will get day number one effect. There are people who think that way, which is very illogical, but there are people who really can't help it. If that is your patient who has decided to take all the tablets at the same time, this can be a toxicity due to acute ingestion. In this case, the plasma potassium may really be high. You should not give more potassium. You just measure the serum potassium and then, if necessary, give potassium therapy. Okay, otherwise not necessary. Acute cases, don't give potassium. Potassium is contraindicated because AV blocks ventricular earth systole may actually be precipitated in some cases. If the patient has ventricular arrhythmia, then the drug of choice is of course lidocaine IV. It decreases the automaticity and kind of makes it better. Other drugs are kind of contraindicated. No quinine, no procainamide, no propafenone. Don't give them. For supraventricular arrhythmias, the drug is of course propranolol, and for atrioventricular blocks and bradycardia, you have to give a pacemaker temporarily or permanent pacemaker. Both can be used. And atropine IM can also help. And if heart is not really beating properly, then you will give cardioversion by a DC shock. Okay, please understand. There is one specific antibody that is marketed called as digibinder. This digoxin antibody is a digoxin specific antibody. It will instantly reverse the cardiotoxicity. And because of digoxin and any other cardiac glycoside. So this is kind of the, if you remember the structure of an antibody, this is the FAB fragment of that antibody. Okay. There's a small problem here. This is actually an orphan drug. An orphan drug means to manufacture this medicine and to distribute it. The amount the company has to invest is so high that the patient can really not buy this drug. It will become exorbitantly kind of costly. But in certain countries, under government's scheme, insurance scheme, this drug may be available. So in Europe, digibind is available. In many other countries, it is really not there. Now that we are clear with what digoxin does, let us have a look at the precautions and contraindications. Now this is optional. You do it, great. If you don't do it, that's fine. In hypokalemia, people who are elderly, mild to moderate renal disease or severe hepatic disease, don't give. Patient with thyrotoxicosis, their heart is already beating too fast. Don't give extra. Ventricular tachycardia is already there. Don't give more drugs like this. Partial AV block, don't give digoxin. It will cause full-blown AV block. And there is a syndrome called as WPW syndrome, Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. You should never give digoxin in these patients. If you do the interaction, that would be beneficial to you in your clinical practice. As far as your exams are concerned, it is not important. So there are only two main indications of digoxin: heart failure and to control ventricular rate in atrial fibrillation and flutter. Okay, when we talk about heart failure in the next video, we will discuss the use of digoxin in heart failure. Right now, focus on atrial fibrillation and atrial flutter. Digoxin does not do anything to the atrium. It can be used for controlling ventricular rate in atrial fibrillation and atrial flutter. Okay, whether there is congestive heart failure or not is not important. Okay, but you can give it at least to stabilize the contraction of ventricle. Does it cure arrhythmia? No. It does not cure arrhythmia. It only controls ventricle. Okay, actually, atrial flutter may become atrial fibrillation because of digoxin. Okay. Now, what it does is, digoxin does is, it reduces ventricular rate. It decreases the number of impulses that are able to pass down from the AV node and bundle of His to the cardiac ventricular fibers. And as a result, the ventricles beat at a much more regular speed. The atrium might be doing anything between 300 to 600. We are not interested in the atrium. Till the time the ventricles are working good, heart rate is fine. The circulation is fine. Okay. Now you don't really have to worry about all these things. But just whatever I am on. Digoxin can be used for long-term ventricular rate control in persistent or permanent flutter of fibrillation, but not the preferred drug for rapid control. Remember, digoxin takes time. So oral or IV beta blocker or a non-DHP calcium channel blocker like diltiazem or verapamil. DHPs, dihydropyridines. Don't give that category of CCBs. Anything else can be given orally or IV. They will instantaneously control the ventricular rate, but then you will start digoxin. We prefer using esmolol, especially for patients who are unstable, hemodynamically unstable. Digoxin is slow to act and is comparatively less effective, but it is preferred when flutter of fibrillation, atrial flutter of fibrillation, is also having heart failure component. Clear? Apart from this, you don't really have to worry too much about what they are doing. Okay? So go through this particular part first. Now you might be wondering what happened to these two pages. These two pages, the action, pharmacological actions, are exactly what I have discussed in the later sections, but given in a much more elaborate step-by-step manner. Do you have to do that for your exam? Absolutely not. Okay, nobody asks this in your exam. For your knowledge, would you like to read this? I leave this choice to you. If you would love to do it, please go ahead and finish this part. So there you have it, everything that you needed to know about digoxin and cardiac glycosides in one small short video. Go through this, let me know if there is any concept that you did not understand. I will be more than happy to help you. Till the next time we meet, this is Dr. Avinash signing off for now. Take care, keep rocking, bye bye.